good evening. It's usually the
So
other way around for us.
yes, it's completely yeah. For good morning, like for you, it is good morning. For me, good evening. And I was really excited to call you on this session, Coffee with Amar, because I feel you have a lot of knowledge, but you have time constraint. You have your own commitments. But good to see you. I'm very excited. By myself only, I'm excited because you have taught me a lot of things as we do work together. We are known as Matter Jeet. We are partners in our work. I really enjoy working with you. So like you have a lot of experience, Matt, but how, how you started like your career and how you ended up in service now? Can you uh, just give some light on it, or can you just let our viewers know about it?
Sure. Yep. So, some 27 years ago, I think, I left university, started my career, um, and I started out as an IT manager. Um, and in those days, an IT manager did the technical work.
Oh,
Um, and then I quickly sort of moved into Unix, Linux technical work, became a sysadmin, started programming in my job. And it was around then that the internet kind of took off, and so I became a web developer. Um, and then some many years later, moved to the UK and started working for what's now Advania, where we work. And I think I was with Advania for about 10 years before it was a company of 60 when I started, and we got to about 600, and all of the tools that we were using were sort of starting to be a bit too small and have kind of performance issues and things like that. So that's when we started to look at ServiceNow. So about 7 years ago
seven
was when I
years.
started working with ServiceNow with an implementation for our company. We partnered with Devo Team, and I think it was about 6 months from tender to go live, and then about 2 years into that, we did a re-implementation, which is becoming a thing that partners advertise as something that they have a skill set for. So I've done one implementation and one re-implementation. So my ServiceNow experience is 7 years and two implementations. It's not that big.
Recently, we did CSM implementation also. You're not including that as an implementation?
No, that's just adding a module to what's already going on, right?
Okay, from scratch, you're saying. Okay, I get you. Okay, from scratch. And how you like about service nomad? Like before, it was another technology. Being into web developer, like I know your scripting is very good, and here, we don't do that much scripting. But I know wherever you find time, you write scripts. That is also good. One thing, but we have seen, service now is moving towards low code, and everything is now, most of the things are out of the box, and we have this flow designer things where by the actions and we can do all our work. So how is this transition in your life? How you feel like that?
Sure. Okay. So before ServiceNow, my responsibilities included maintaining the hardware, maintaining the operating system, maintaining the databases, the web servers, the proxy
Okay.
servers. I've got network certificates in Cisco and FortiGate. I've got Microsoft certificates. I've got Linux
Nice.
certificates. Um, and so moving to ServiceNow was, moving to a platform as a service that's maintained as well as ServiceNow. That I think that the thing that people, the invisible thing that people don't see is that ServiceNow is incredibly good at keeping their system up, and performance is really good. And you're on your own instance, so it's as if you had your own infrastructure and servers and operating systems, but they manage it for you, and that's invisible and it's incredible. And the other thing is, people sort of they get stuck in their own little modules of ServiceNow, and they forget that it really is a platform as a service. And I think that's the key thing that it's really good at. If you start with a base, zero module instance of ServiceNow, you can really solve any business problem you want in a very quick amount of time and start working. So that's what I really like about it.
Perfect, perfect. So, Matt, like before this, when, as you said, you did the implementation with Devo team. So, our instance or Advania instance was a single, like a dedicated instance, right? Then it became a domain separated instance. Right now, what we are seeing.
Yeah. So um, I think ServiceNow has a sort of guideline, a set of questions that you go through to decide whether you should domain separate.
Okay.
And I guess that it's a 20% uplift in your licensing cost, and so it's a real consideration on whether you need to domain separate or if you can manage without domain separation. And it's not just a 20% uplift to your license; it's probably also a 20% uplift to your team. Domain separation adds complications that require more resources to work through. So, going through those questions with Devo team, uh, they decided or they recommended that we didn't need to domain separate and we could get by with the sort of before query rules to manage our requirement for data separation, because as an MSP, and by that I mean as a company that manages other people's IT for them, we are an ITSM provider for other companies, not a ServiceNow MSP
As you
for
say.
other companies. So our users work incidents for other companies, and they do problems and change, and they manage hardware assets for other companies, that kind of thing. So um, we had a requirement that customers couldn't see each other's data. That was our main kind of data requirement in ServiceNow, and we started off managing that with before query rules. But after about 2 years, we had some problems where there were areas of the platform that we kind of had to turn off because they came before query rules. So that's the VTBs, the visual task boards.
Visual transport.
So if a customer went into a visual task board, they could see other customers' records. So we had to kind of turn off visual task boards, and it became apparent that there were going to be more and more things that ServiceNow introduced that kind of had that behavior. And also, whenever a new release came out, we didn't just have to upgrade, we also had to then check all the new features and check whether they worked with our way of separating data. And so that's why 2 years in, we decided that we needed to domain separate, and hence the re-implementation.
Okay, that's the implementation, and we were ready for the cost and all. Okay, so initially it was like we were looking at the cost and we thought it's more, and we went with our implementation like query business rules, and afterwards we went this domain separation plugins. Get you. Okay, so this was a great learning. I feel this is a great learning. So from there, when we were doing domain separation. Matt, then what was your, like, in your mind, So have we done the training? Our team members, like basically your team members, you. So how you cope up with this domain separation, and when it was coming on your way, so what was the feeling like? One more technology new into service now, because already you had all these issues with query business rules. So how the journey was like with domain separation, and what all things we need to take care while doing this implementation of domain separation.
Yeah, so I think we took a fairly long time to get into production with our re-implementation. So I would say it took about a year, and we hired someone who had worked in the domain separation team in ServiceNow, and so just hired them to come in and work with us and teach us about domain separation. And the goal was, for a 3-month consultancy to have at the end a domain map, a model for domain separation that would work for us. And then we were going to, beef up our team of 3, maybe double it, maybe a little bit more, to do the implementation with consultants, and then go back to a team of 3. So I guess we were a bit naive in that sense. So 3 months in with this consultant, they came out with a domain map, which was basically the white paper for the ServiceNow MSPs, which is not what we are. And we were still struggling with the concept of domain separation and how we could have our users able to go into any domain but still maintain the separation for them. And we had to, or we kind of had to say, okay, we can't do this on our own. We'll need someone else to come in that's done it many times before. So that's when we partnered with Conversational, and not Conversational. What am I saying? Flyform. Partnered with Flyform, and they came in and did the implementation with us. And at the same time, we started increasing the size of our team because it had become apparent that we needed to be a bit bigger.
Yeah. And would you like to talk about Matt overrides, and where this, what you say, contains domains, something like about like how the ideal domains should look like, let's say if I have let's say 12 clients, okay, so what are the best practices we can follow for this implementation according to you, like as per your experience, what you have seen till now?
For an MSP, like Advania is an MSP, or domain separation
XYZ.
could work on departments rather than companies, right? It could be for a big single
Yes,
company,
yes.
or
Yeah.
you may be segregating your instance so that you can have many companies managing their own IT on ServiceNow, which sounds delightful. If you're within the purpose that ServiceNow has envisioned for domain separation, I think life with it would be great. When you're slightly outside the box, like we are, it's still a struggle. You're still pushing kind of things that are out of the box, and I think that I think people get caught in the concept or the philosophy that you should stay as close to uncustomized as
Mm.
possible with ServiceNow. But that's another sort of thing that I kind of rally against, because the reason people get ServiceNow is because it's customizable.
Customized.
It's made to be customized. That's what it's really good at. You can do whatever you want with it. And so I think one of the big learnings that we had was, we did 3 or 4 quite big sort of customizations to get around the way that we'd implemented domain separation. And I think at the time they made sense to us. And then if you look at that, 2 years later, we're taking them out,
Mm.
and doing it a different way. And I don't know whether that's all just a journey that we went on, or if it's a journey that ServiceNow went on while, during those 2 years. Domain separation got a little bit better in some of the modules. It expanded, its support levels across some of the modules. So hard to say whether, whether we're closer to out of the box now because we did it wrong at the start, or whether ServiceNow just improved domain separation to meet our needs.
Yeah.
So overrides, I think in our business, our requirements were data separation, not process separation. So
Yes.
we really didn't have any process separation requirements. And we did discuss turning off the process separation side of domain separation, which you can do. You can switch it so that it's either just data separation or process or both.
It has a system
Um,
properties. Yeah, it has a system
yeah,
properties.
it does.
Yeah.
But there was one module change, I think, where change wasn't going to work so well without process separation. So we definitely wanted to leave that in, because we support one company with one kind of change model and another company with a different kind of change model, and it's much easier with an override than it is to have
Yeah.
a picker picking a different
Yeah.
change template.
Each company can have different implementation plans, backout plans. So we need to give them that kind of fields.
Risk assessments, that kind of
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the workflows that run them. Workflows are now
Yes.
domain separated.
Workflow.
So
Yes. Workflows.
um, yeah, so the main requirements were data separation, and we just created a model where we had an upside down tree, and all our customers are down in the branches, and our users are sitting up in the trunk. They can see everything below them. But the biggest catch we had there was that means that our customers can't see our users because they're not in global, they're not in the domain. But that was one of the things that we just had to put up with, and I think it's still going to be the way we have going forward.
Would you like
Uh,
to talk about Matt? Okay, sorry. Continue. Continue.
that's
You
all
were
right.
saying something.
Carry on.
If you're
More questions?
finished, yeah. I was like thinking about visibility. Can you talk about something about visibility, user visibility, group visibility? So how much it is useful in domain separated instance?
Yeah, so when we implemented, we had one domain which we called the shared domain, and each of our customers has the same domain. So it's an area of the platform, excluding global, where every customer can see the same data that's in it, and that enabled us to put some records in there, like assignment groups that could be used by us with our agents in them, but seen by all of the customers. Um, so it was shared. It was our data that we were sharing with all of our customers. Um, and then uh, one of the big customizations that we've done in ServiceNow's domain separation when we went live was we wanted our agents to sort of start their work in the morning and say, I'm working for company A. And then they would change the domain picker to company A. And that meant that everything they did was data separated for company A.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's great. If you go on site at the customer's workplace, or if you're seconded there for a 3-month period to run their IT as a support analyst, it means that anyone looking over your shoulder sees all the same data. It's all just that customer's data. But it does mean if you have a shared help desk, let's say you have 200 people who answer the phone calls and work on whichever company has rung up, company A, company B, company C, and then it becomes quite difficult for them. The friction is high. They receive a phone call. It's John Smith from company C, and the last person they worked with was company B, and their domain picker is still company B, and they can't find John Smith or company C until they change their domain picker. And we'd created a method for the visibility of our own users. So it's quite hard to sort of show without a tree, but when this call comes in from company C and they change the domain picker to company C, that means that they can no longer see their own domain.
Yeah.
And the domain where all of all of the other ITSM agents are. So um, an
Expanding the
agent of
domain.
Advania. Yeah.
Expanding the domain.
Yeah. So we had a little button that would expand the domain scope for them, and allow them to choose an assignee for an incident, for example, from our company. And the reason that we're doing all of this is because we have ITSM users that work for Company C, that are employees of Company C and Company B. So we have tenants in the ServiceNow MSP sense of the word, working on the platform with us as well. And so then we implemented, just recently, we implemented domain visibility, which we've applied by group. So Advania users now have domain visibility. This is all very complicated to sort of see without a map or something, but Advania users now essentially aren't domain separated anymore. There's no data separation for them. They don't have to use the domain picker, and this has removed the friction for them, but it has also, introduced that element of, if they log into the instance when they're on a company site, potentially someone looking over their shoulder will see all of the data for other customers. So there's now an element of caution involved, but we're at the maturity level now where we can handle that.
Yes, yes, for sure. Yeah. So we know, like, when we are at a client side where we need to see it, we need to, follow the compliance. We need to, basically hide our data. So yeah, that's what we are that matured. So I think we have talked much about domain separation. Let's switch to your favorite topic, Matt, integrations. So first of all, like, how you see integration, Matt, like this ServiceNow integration. I know you have done a lot of integration in your past, maybe like in Microsoft's everything, but how you see ServiceNow integrations? We have a plugin, we just need to do the configuration, lot of testings. So I think, yeah, your views. This is how I look. You say.
Yeah, so I guess integrations come in a few different categories. From the early days of ServiceNow.
REST APIs.
Yeah, but I mean, from the early days of our implementation with ServiceNow, we were looking at integrations that weren't about tools that had a crossover with ServiceNow. So there were things like Okta for authentication, and there were monitoring systems that weren't necessarily from big companies, and so they didn't have a ServiceNow plugin or a ServiceNow module, and they weren't, for us, they weren't going to be used in the same way that that you would if you were a company with a ServiceNow instance and a monitoring tool instance. So for us, this might be that company C has got a monitoring tool and wants to integrate, that with their data in ServiceNow, but company B has a different monitoring tool and they want to integrate that with their data in ServiceNow. So it's sort of a different approach to integrations in that sense. And then you've got others like warranty tools, HR line of business apps. So the start of a user's journey in company C in an HR app when they're hired, and then the journey of that data through to making an account in their authentication system, and also in ServiceNow, that can be different between company B and company C as well. So we had a lot of things out in the infrastructure when we went to ServiceNow, and we had to create our own integrations and customizations. We had a lot of little Python microservices running in our own infrastructure to be like a third party generic integration system. And the interesting thing about that is that's one of the places where I guess it's my inexperience with ServiceNow meant that we went down the wrong track. So we created this infrastructure outside of ServiceNow, we were worried about the performance impact that would have, on our instance. And 2 years in, we have slowly, natively in ServiceNow, created the same application. So we've replaced a Python microservice with a ServiceNow microservice, and of course the instances can handle the load. It's not, it's exactly the same infrastructure. It's a database and a server with a node, or 3 nodes, 5 nodes, running integration. And now in ServiceNow, it's the only thing that's changed is instead of being in Python, it's written in an abstracted JavaScript. So I think don't be scared about doing a grassroots level integration in ServiceNow yourself. And I would say not only is it closer to what you need, because you're not converting some kind of box to a bespoke integration, you're also not having to pay for each transaction if you do it yourself.
Yes. This was the topic, Matt. When I was in my last organization, so client came and they said they need Jira integration. So they had their own Jira, instances. Then we did some research. So ServiceNow had its own plugin of Jira integration. It's like Bush Bash. That's how we do, like, plugins installation. We add the configuration. Then we went there and, like, we took the demo instance of Jira, and ServiceNow instances were a lot in that company. It was a very big company, so we had a lot of demo instances. So we integrated with Jira, and we went with the client and we showed them how it works with the plugins. They were like, "We know this. We can also do this." Like, they were like, as we are called like a technical company, so they were like, "We know this. This we also can do. We don't want to go with plugins. It is, we need to maintain that. We need to pay high amount of money to ServiceNow. So we want you to do with REST API, and we have an integration expert who will provide you with all the APIs, whatever you need. So do you have that expertise?" So at that time, we were little worried, Matt. And when we went to the community, nobody had done successful implementation on Jira integrations. I don't know why. And we went into the pool of our company. We asked everyone, "Do you have any documentation of Jira integrations?" Everyone was like, "Matt, they have done partially, and they were not able to proceed it, or they were not able to succeed it. There was no success for them. They left halfway, you can say. And it was a challenge for us. So everyone was like, "Should we take this project?" And I was like, "Let's do it. Like, it's just an API field mapping. We will do it." And finally, we were able to do it. And from that time, Matt, like, when I started my career, I was very much worried about this integrations. Everyone used to talk about, like, is it an inbound or outbound integration? Which services you're using, REST services or SOAP services? So I was very worried, how it works, and nobody was there to guide us. So, and there were no this YouTube channels at that time. So there was a fear of integration, and I feel this fear is there in a lot of youngsters. So in the morning itself, I got a message on LinkedIn. You guys are having this YouTube channel video, so do share me the link. And I'm really interested to know how this integration works, how domain separation works. So I feel that's the fear, and that's the reason we are here. We just want to, like, Matt, can you describe them? Like, actually integration basically is nothing but it's just like, connection between them, field mapping. So how you see, Matt, like, how the integrations are?
Yep. So then it comes down to 3 kinds of integration, right? There's quite a few integrations where it's the remote system that has a way of sending out some kind of trigger with data on it, and it's not expecting anything back. And so in that sense, you can, in ServiceNow, you can very easily create a scripted REST API with some endpoints that receive that data from the remote system and then do something with them. And you know, there's so many different software as a service applications out there. They're small. They're not going to have a ServiceNow module, and so this is the only path you can take, and they're pretty simple integrations because it's just one way. And with ServiceNow, you have the flexibility to choose whether there's any authorization, or if you need OAuth, or different ways you can present some kind of um, authentication for the remote system, and then you can script um, each post from the remote system. You can script how it's handled, and then there's integrations where ServiceNow essentially needs to do the same thing, because this remote system has, they're not usually configurable. They just have a published API that you can't change. And so with ServiceNow, that's also really great, because off the base of a task update, let's say an incident update, an incident changes to complete. You can have a business rule or an event. I recommend using an event. You can have a business rule or an event that triggers ServiceNow to make an API call or several API calls to this remote system and send them some data based on your own business logic. And because ServiceNow is so flexible in this sense, you can use their out of the box record based configuration for APIs, or you can completely script how that call to the remote system is constructed. And so you're not expecting any data back, or maybe you get one response back from the remote system when you post it. It processes that post and sends you something back. And so those integrations are also pretty simple, because there isn't any communication, or there isn't a dialogue between the two systems. It's just ServiceNow throwing something at another system. So when you really kind of need to be careful is when you're talking about implementing a process between two systems. So rather than just receiving some data or throwing some data out, we're talking about creating a dialogue between two systems, where one system can say, "Hi, ServiceNow, I've got some data for
Yeah,
you,"
yeah, yeah.
and then ServiceNow says, "Great, I've got that, and what we've done with it is we've turned it into an incident, and so we're going to follow the incident process." Or what we've done with it is we've turned it into a request, and we're going to follow the request process. And then that might be the fork in your dialogue between the two systems. So once you sort of start that, you need to do things like create a language. So the systems need to have a defined dialogue or flow that they the two integrations that on either side that you're creating can talk about. Because um, what I think a lot of people miss is that when that data is processed in ServiceNow, it then starts its own journey on the ServiceNow process. So, as before I said, it's either an incident or a request. If it's a request, it starts a fairly complicated, ServiceNow internal ITSM process, where it's split up into different requested items, potentially more than one, and then worked on by multiple people. And so all of a sudden you've got, let's say, 15 task records um, that are part of the integration. Are you still there, Amar?
I'm there. I'm there. I'm there. One second.
Okay,
I got a
sure.
call, and yes, I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. I received a call, and it got, oh, the screen got frozen. But
All right,
can you just give me 1 minute? I will make my coffee. It got over. 1 minute.
sure.
Thank you, Matt. So yeah, Matt, this was really helpful insight. And one more thing, Matt, I have given a lot of interviews in my life. I have done very less switches as compared to other people. I cannot compare with you because you have been here from long time, and from other companies also you have served long time. So I have given like lot of interviews. Maybe I did not join there, but have a good experience of interview. So there is a very hard questions, or very uh, always this question is asked in every interviews, Matt, like how you will do the error handling in integrations. So there are people, if the connection is established, they are happy. So let's say I have seen you how you have done the integrations, like you always keep the response with you, so that in future you understand what things are going wrong. So how important is that, and how easy it is to maintain? And about field mapping also, Matt, let's say we were talking about this, last week or 2 weeks back. So how important is to maintain the field mapping? Because let's say we are integrating with other system, let's say it's a e-bonding integration or anything. If someone changes the value in another system, how much impact it makes here. So I think you have seen these things, so this will be really great to know from you.
Yeah, so I mean that's really relevant to what I was just saying. So it's a sort of follow on from that. So you've got this
Yeah.
process running, you've got this process, this request process running in ServiceNow, and in the other side of the integration, we've now created 15 request items. They're transferred back to the other system, and potentially, this is a scenario that we have with one of our integrations. Let's say the other instance is ServiceNow. It's now running its own request process, which is different from
Yeah.
from our side. So the remote side is running its own request process, and it's got 15 requested items potentially. And some of those might be worked on in the remote system, and some of them
Mhm.
might be worked on in our source system. So you really need to create a dialogue, and we call it an e-bonding um, record, let's say. So each of those task records, the requested items, the SC tasks off the back of those, if they have them, they have their own e-bonding record, and in the integration you describe the dialogue between the two systems in that e-bonding record. So we have a concept of ownership in our system. So is our system the owner, or is the remote system the owner? And that's handled by decisions that the agent makes. So the agent might say, I'm going to transfer the ownership of this record to the other system. And at that point, um, the process running on our system stops applying. So you might have a process that says you can't go from in progress to complete. You might have a stage in the middle that it has to go through, but that no longer applies because it's the remote systems process that's managing it. So especially for integrating things like change or the request process, you really need a way of sort of allowing your instance to stand back and not do that. And so that's what this concept of an e-bonding record kind of helps. Um, so along with that comes the complexity of what to do if you send an update, let's say a state change or an assignment update to the remote system. Maybe you're handing over ownership, so you're saying, "Hey, take this requested item and complete it for us." And the remote system says, I didn't understand, or I wasn't there right now. You get a 402 come back later response. And I think this is where a lot of custom integrations might run into an issue,
Issue.
because if you haven't configured a way to handle that transaction, that assignment change or that ownership change gets lost, and on your side, you're handed the record over, and you don't intend to do anything with it until it comes back and says, I've fulfilled this side of the of the business process, and take over or close it off. So potentially you've got a dropped ball there, and the user account in AD isn't going to be created by the internal support team on the other side. So in our integration, we keep an incremental number in the dialogue. So it starts off at 1 when the remote system initiates the conversation, or at 1 when we initiate the conversation, and then each part of the dialogue at that point increments that number, and we store all of the information involved in each side's turn against that number. So in the example that we were talking about, where we've transferred the ownership, let's say that was update number 5. Update number 5 has failed, and we have a queue that transaction is sitting in, and it's showing as failed. And there are workers that take items out of the queue and attempt to process them. So usually what happens is, on our side, when someone changes the assignment, that creates a transaction that goes into the queue, and it's sitting in the ready state, and then the worker picks it up and tries to send it to the remote instance. The remote instance says, come back later, and so that goes into the failed state, and then 10 seconds later, the worker picks it up again and tries to send it again. And either if the remote instance was doing an upgrade or had an outage, which hardly ever happens, but we do see this when we do upgrades, or when the other team in the remote instance do upgrades. So it might be retried for 10 minutes, let's say, and then it will go through. And then at that point, update number 6 and update number 7 might have been queued on our instance, because this is all invisible to the users who are working on our side. So that they've changed the assignee, and now they've gone to in progress, let's say, and let's say they called the person who's responsible for approving up, and that person has approved it. So it's all sorts of things have happened, so that those are updates 6, 7, and 8, and they won't have been processed until update 5 goes through. So that's one way of dealing with error handling. And I guess, other ways you could do things like, when there's an error, you have a flag that lets the person looking at the record know, so they can see that there's been a problem, and then they might call someone on the other end, and work out a way of getting the two records back into the state that allows the dialogue to carry on. I think
answered the question.
at this point, it really depends on what sort of process you're integrating, or how you're going to work, which is one of the reasons why using something that's out of the box, like a module for integration, can be good or can be bad. A module has just one process configured in it, and depending on the integration, that might work, and it might be a great choice to go with an out-of-the-box module. But I think, if you're talking about integrating two ServiceNow instances, the other ServiceNow instance that you have no control over, and they may need to change their ITSM process. One of the things you really want to avoid is if you've got two ServiceNow instances integrated, and let's say you're not responsible for the other one in any way, it's maintained by a different team that's not part of your company. You don't want them to have to go through their upgrade process and then turn around and describe to you, before they can finish their upgrade, turn around and describe to you all of the changes that they're making, so that you can then, look at your process maps and go, okay, so what we're doing is, when they go to, their processes, when they go to state in progress, these other changes are made. You don't want to have to implement their ITSM process in your side. And so starting out with a you know creating an integration um, process that takes that into account and avoids having to do that, would be a good goal. Um,
With this
so
point, Matt, I had one like a suggestion. Like basically, if we are integrating with a system, so I feel like we should have a monthly one call, like just to understand what all things is going on, is everything going on correctly? Because from other system, they are in another company, but they are bonded with us. They have an integration with us. So we have a customer like this. We had a customer like this. So that call may be empty. We don't have any inputs, but we had a placeholder basically to discuss on this. If you have any issues, so there is a placeholder we can directly contact with each other. So maybe a placeholder will be there in the in the calendar, so everyone can come, and they can say, oh, no issues, you can leave the call within 5 minutes, but someone is there to basically responsible for it till the end. Basically the placeholder will be there in the calendar till the integration is there. Basically that's what we used to do. What happens, like integration is working fine initially, everything is good 1 2 months, and people forget about it and they start doing their work and they want to do anyhow. And we have seen people use service now in many ways, Matt. Like we have implemented in one way, but we have not tested that way, and we get that's the point of incident. We get we get a lot of incidents. Oh, this was the thing we did not thought about it. Like user can submit a request like that. So there are many things user can do. We cannot go into their mind. So I feel there should be regular meetings to connect with them, to understand how they are using it, what are their incidents, what kind of incidents. Then we can do some remediation from our side, from from our side, from integration, and they can do something from their end. What do you feel?
yeah, I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? We have a dashboard for the integrations,
Correct.
so it means that the person that's responsible for the integration, or maybe the person that's responsible for the communication between the two teams, can open up their dashboard and go, on a call like this, they could go, well, we've got 5 incidents that seem to have disconnected. Can we look at those and just talk about how to get them back online, or make sure they are, um, in sync?
In sync.
So yeah, but I think technically, from a technical perspective, you can never do enough logging.
Okay.
So I think in a lot of immature integration systems, um, yesterday something goes wrong, and the next day, um, a person who's working on the record sort of says to the team, "Hey, this isn't working. It stopped working," and you can't go back to yesterday and have a look at what went wrong.
Oh,
So
hope I had a
it seems
travel
like a
machine.
lot.
Matt, we can make
So
you can make a travel machine for me. I can go to
yeah,
yesterday.
yeah. Well, no, so that's essentially what we do, right? We have a lot of logging going on, but it does mean that you can play back the data. So every change on an integrated record, the data at that point in time is recorded. And what we sent, what we received back. And it means that, when there's a problem, you can quickly go back and go, okay, we sent the right data, and the remote instance has not handled it correctly. And so you can take those sort of packages of, at this point in time, the record looked like this, and this is the data we sent, and you can say to the remote team, we sent you this, and you responded with this exact
This is
data, and this is why it's wrong. And then that means that the remote team can take ownership, and it's not an element of finger pointing, but it's an element of working out who's responsible, because if you're trying to debug
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
a
yeah.
remote instance that you can't see, you need to know who's wrong.
Who's wrong? Yeah, I can relate to this. Yeah, actually, it is important to, like, people think we are finger pointing on them, but it's like we are just letting them know you have made these mistakes. This should not be done. Like, this is an IT world basically, Matt. When we do the mistakes, we remember lifetime. I will not do these things. Yeah, next time. That's what I have learned from my experiences. So yeah. So Matt, actually, we are running out of time, and you are a busy guy. I know this is your weekend. So, Matt, let's talk about scripting, Matt. Like how people can increase their, or basically they can do this service now scripting. We will talk about service now scripting, Matt. How they can, you know, uphold themselves and they can increase their service now scripting. What advice you have for them?
What advice? Well, I mean, it's a very ServiceNow scripting is very. Um, I
Let
mean, I find it very.
But
It's very easy.
let me
But
revise my question. Okay, the thing
sure.
is, like, because you said it's very easy. Let me revise my question. What happens, Matt? I think you're not aware of it. Basically, what happens? The people who come in service now. This is a harsh truth. Maybe people won't like it, but it happens most of the time because I have been into this space from 10 years, Matt, So, and have started from the base, from college itself. Like I got the, basically, I became a graduate and I got, this job directly from the college, from the university, basically. And I was placed into a company, and from there company gave me this, this technology. It was like they used to train us in a lot of technology, man. Linux, Apache server, DB, databases. So I have done that part. They used to call it as infrastructure management services. So service now comes under that, man, because it is like a, ITL based. It is like a, behind the scenes. So they don't consider this as a development thing. But as you said, service now came up with that idea. You can do customization a lot. It had a lot of scripting involved in it. But people used to think it's a ticketing tool at that time. So it was placed, if you see in a IT world, it was placed in the IMS batch, infrastructure management services. So and this, basically this batch people used to get mad who are in this technology, like electronics, electrical, those who are not from computer backgrounds. So I'm also not from computer background, man. So there are a lot of people in service now, they are not from computer background because of this thing. I told you the history, how it started from the college. And this is the history, like it happens all the time this way, because it has been portrayed like, if you are in service now, you don't need that much scripting. But when we come into the real world, you should have a good knowledge of scripting. Like when I started working with you, then when I came to know the value of scripting, I understood like the way how scripting works. Previously was like, requirement is done, that is fine, leave it. Then, like, to be very honest, like I started understanding how, okay, this is the way script should work, and what are the consequences if this script works. So there are a lot of my friends, are viewers, so they are also from same background and they are into service now. So in that perspective, Matt, you have to answer. Basically, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah. Okay. So, um, ServiceNow scripting um, is the same as scripting in any other kind of platform. So I think picking up um, any JavaScript kind of beginner scripting is and working through it is probably just as relevant. It doesn't have to be ServiceNow oriented. Um, and then it's I guess it's understanding. I don't know whether there's any kind of white papers or guides on this, but it's understanding the different ways in ServiceNow to implement scripts and how they um, how they should be used or when they should be used, because you have client scripts which are exactly like, if you're a web developer, it's
Yeah.
it's the same scenario. it's
That's
it's
what
being
makes
executed in the
people.
browser, and then
Yeah, that's what made
so
people are not from the developing background. In my 4 years of graduation, I never had any scripting, Matt. And
yeah.
I think people are there directly. They are pushed into IT now from where I come, like from our country, from abroad. So they are into like they have to support their family and they are like into it. And now we have to work for it. So there are a lot of people I know them. So that's the reason why people feel scripting is very tough. And it was like 4 years. We were like, oh my god, we are in this batch, electronics batch. We don't have to look after scripting. And man, there is no job in that field basically. Less job. I cannot say no job because people will get backfire on me. There are very less job, and the way IT works. The wages are very high. The development is high as compared to again, Matt, I got a call. Sorry. Yeah. So, Matt, in
That's all right.
that sense, basically, it's very important, Matt, to make people understand. I feel like I was from electronics background. That's why I'm stressing on this word. There are a lot of people they feel like, oh, service now is not my cup of tea. There are a lot of scripting. There are a lot of things to remember, Matt. If you have seen, we have gone to that module last year and today we have to go to the same module. We think how I went there. And the scripting is also same way, Matt. Once you enjoy it, then you enjoy it. But there is a fear, Matt. So maybe some kind of motivation, like how you did, because your scripting is, Matt, great. So how you did when you started the scripting? I just wanted to ask you this.
Well, I mean, I started the scripting about 30 years ago when I
Yeah.
when I wrote a program for random dice so that I could play my Dungeons and Dragons game when I was about 8, I think. And we saved that to a tape drive. It took 5 minutes to load it. But there's an interesting meme that I saw recently that kind of describes what you're talking about, and
Yeah.
it's about solving Rubik's cubes. So I don't know if you've seen these people on the internet and things, but some people can solve Rubik's cubes very fast.
Fast. Yeah, yeah, I've seen.
Um, but anyone can learn to solve a Rubik's cube in 10 minutes. It's just learning 15 steps. And I think there's
Algorithms.
about three lots of different 15 steps. But if you sat down, and I mean this, anyone, if they sat down and they memorized the steps, and it's only 15 things, 15, different movements that you have to memorize, then you'd be able to solve the Rubik's Cube. And then the meme goes on and it expands the size of the cube. And they had to learn sort of three more steps that turned it into the same steps that they had before. So they only had to learn that. And then they expanded the size of the cube again, and the person realizes that they already know the process for turning that big one into the smaller one and then into the smaller one. So they didn't need to learn anymore, and they could solve any size of Rubik's Cube. And scripting or programming is the same. It's people think it's rocket science,
Yeah.
but if you break it down and you learn the small thing, and then you can do the small things, and then you pick up the big thing and you learn the small differences that make that big thing into a small thing. It's about breaking down the problems that you're facing into small steps. And programming or scripting is all about small steps, small little functions that add up to a bigger thing.
Yes, yes, I've seen that. With you, always I have doubts. I come to you. Matt, just tell me this thing. I don't want the other things. I just want this thing from you. I will work on it and I will come back to you. So I understood that part, Matt. Yeah, really. But this example was really great. Cubic one. It never came in my mind. And yesterday, that's a different topic. We will discuss it afterward. Yeah. So, Matt, I think we discussed about domain separation, we discussed about integrations, we discussed about scripting. I think we are
Yeah,
done, and 1 hour is completed. I won't take much time because I know other things are there in your life.
yeah. My kids are about to wake up.
Yeah, that's what, man. I did not wanted to say that. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Thank
Sure.
you so much.
Thanks,
It was
Amardeep.
great talking to you. Thank you, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.